step back, puts up the three, got hit, shot's good, and one! James Harden double team, and a chance for a 4-point play.
Welcome back to the DC pod. I am Christian, joined by Dallas diehard Darcy. We cover all things basketball. Now, it's been 5 days since we last did a pod, so we do apologize about that. The playoffs have already kicked off, but we will do a little bit of catch up before we sort of start talking about all the series. So first question to you, Darcy, because we haven't really spoken since the last couple of playing games happened, but what did you make of both Wizards, Pacers, and then obviously the big one between Memphis and Golden State?
Well, the Pacers, they didn't really show up to that game. Hey, that was over at halftime. They basically mailed in that game quickly. Westbrook just shut it down real quick. Beal scored a few baskets, and I think they were resting with about 8 minutes to go in that one. So a little bit of a surprise, even though we both thought Washington were going to win. But to flip it over to the Golden State game, that was a big surprise because that was a thriller. You know, that game had the kind of intensity that the Lakers-Warriors game had. And to me, from what I was able to see, it boiled down to the end of regulation with the game tied. Draymond had the ball at the top of the key with no one on him and somehow managed to airball a floater when he was uncontested and then drove into a contested place and missed a shot. So, you know, Draymond's had a great season, but that was a really poor moment from him, and they weren't able to capitalize on a big run that they made at the end of that game. Warriors should have won that, no doubt in my mind, but credit to Memphis for pulling that one out. They made some really big plays. Huge game from Brooks, some clutch moments from Morant, big moment from their backup center, Zave Tillman as well. So credit to Memphis. That was probably an outstanding win for them, their best of the year. Yeah,
that's the key thing for me. How Memphis managed to find a way to win that with both Valanciunas and Triple J, although Triple J hasn't been good, but with both their bigs in foul trouble. Doesn't seem like, as we've mentioned the last few pods as well with Memphis, that Brandon Clark is even in the rotation anymore, which is, I think it's been mentioned by enough people now to say that he's not injured or not hampered. It's just, you know, the coach has just really narrowed down his rotation, and for whatever reason, he's rather going to go with, you know, Tillman over Clark, which is interesting. Tillman has been good, so it's hard to really argue about, you know, Jenkins' decisions with rotation, considering not only how they went in the playing games, but yesterday's game, which we'll obviously get into and speak about. So it's been a really good week if you're a Grizzlies fan. I'm not sure if there's anybody out there that is, but yeah, I think it's pretty gutting that Steph can't be in the playoffs. That really hurt. You obviously mentioned
he played another ripper. He played another ripper.
He did about as good.
Unstoppable.
Yeah, he did about as good as you can, and it was obviously revealed that he was dealing with the fracture in his tailbone since he fell on that step or whatever the structure was there in Houston all those months ago, and he's been playing with the pad on his butt for, you know, what feels like 2 months. So yeah, pretty heroic effort by him. You just wish some of the plays where the ball was getting thrown to like a Mulder or a Wiggins, that if that's Clay, like it's a completely different story. Even coming off an ACL and Achilles, like if all he can do is just stand and shoot, gosh, like, you know, it's still just going to be absolutely lethal to see him back on the court next year. So I'm very excited about that. Hopefully a bit more of a development, bit more promise you see out of Wiseman as well. Give him that sort of option, because Looney, you're getting as much as you can out of Looney. He's a very limited player, and if this is the peak, what you're getting out of Looney, you really need to hope that Wiseman can develop quick. I think Bob Myers said the other day something like, we're not trading Wiseman, we're not thinking about trading Wiseman, which is a very media cliche type answer. You're never going to put all your cards in, like he's going to come out and say, yeah, we're trading him, like whatever. I know that happens all the time, and people then say, look, he is a part of the future. But yeah, I think a key part for them is obviously as well what happens in the lottery, and if they can get that Minnesota pick, you know, that sort of changes a lot for them. But yeah, Wiggins has been really good as well, is probably the final thing I'll say, but he had some poor moments in OT in that game in particular, and the one shot sort of stands out where he caught it, minute and a half to go. They're down by 1 or down by 2, and he decides to shoot the 3 from the wing, and he misses it so bad that it hits, you know. So when you're shooting from the wing, right, the worst thing you can obviously do is brick it so bad that it goes over the ring and hits the corner of the other side of the backboard. And unfortunately, that's what he did. It wasn't even a miss that could give his guys a chance to get the rebound. It was just a complete brick, and that sort of really was flat and momentum killing, because I've got the video on my phone and I can send it to you, Das. But if you just watch Curry's hands up, like, swing the ball back, let's get some back screens going, let's get the ball in movement. And as soon as you see the ball getting shot up, Curry's hands just like, oh, fuck no. And as soon as it's a brick, Curry's just running back and he sort of heads down. And it was just really a momentum killer. Obviously, if it goes in, it's a game changer. But I just think still it was a bad shot.
I like the confidence of him to step up and shoot it. Like you say, he had been playing well and he kind of took that moment to take over. And that is kind of what they needed. But that particular shot is not what they needed at that time. Like, feels like if it's off the dribble for Wiggins shooting a 3-pointer, that feels like an absolute settle for him, with his athleticism, and his ability to, even if a guy cuts him off on a drive, for him to spin and elevate in the mid-range, that feels like a better shot to me than any kind of dribble pull-up three. He's a guy who can catch and shoot three at a decent clip, but he's known his struggles from the 3-point line, especially off the dribble, creating into a 3-point shot. That's not his game. So, yeah, for me, it was the right time for him to attack, but he just definitely settled, and obviously did not get the result that they were hoping for. And you're right, it really hurt their momentum down the stretch. They weren't able to hit shots.
Yeah, so that sucks that we don't get Golden State in the playoffs, and I think people were a little bit bummed. But credit to Ja to hitting that big shot. It started off the game really nicely for him, where he was knocking down that 3 ball, and you just sort of like, oh no, is this sort of what's going to happen? Because he obviously struggled in there,
right?
Yeah, 5 for 10 from deep for that game for Ja. So really punished
him. That's what we asked for.
Exactly.
That's what we asked for from him. He delivered.
So. Yeah, and I think we do got to mention him. I know I obviously slander him a lot, and then I message you about him when he does something good. But yeah, Brooks has been close to ridiculous in terms of just defensively. We can start talking about his offense and how he's been playing really well on that side of the ball as of late as well. But can you do a much better job than he did on, first Curry in the end of the regular season game, where you can say he was shutting him down until he fouled out. Then he held DeRozan to 5 of 21 shooting. And then obviously puts in a great shift again on Steph in this single elimination game. So, and that's not even to mention the job he did yesterday, defending a ton of different guys on the Jazz team anyway that we can speak about.
Scoring 30.
I think we've got to start to put Brooks in a category where he's up there with the guys you sort of speak about, with a on-ball defender that's terrific, whether it be, Kawhi from a couple of years ago, and obviously how Ben's doing at the moment, Ben Simmons, even Smart, Draymond, Lou Dort. Like, I know, it's tough to put Brooks above any of those guys, but he's certainly got to be in the conversation, I think, after what we've seen out of him recently. What do you think? You've always been high on him. I'll say that. You've always been more positive and more, let's say, friendly towards him, but I've always been on the negative side. So
you got to like watching a player who like digs in defensively. He's the type of guy who you see that he knows that he's not the most talented player and he can't afford to not be, foot down, being the aggressor, being the guy who's determining what the offensive player is going to do. He can't just afford to see what they're going to do and then react. He doesn't necessarily have that length or that quickness. He's the guy who's going to get into you. And from what I've been hearing from the broadcast from Memphis, he's probably the hardest worker on their team. He's the fittest guy. He's the guy who's been putting the most work in during the season, staying late, getting shots up, and working real hard on his fitness and strength. And it shows because through a grind of a season, he's now playing his best ball at the very end at the most crucial time. In elimination games, he's bringing his best game, and that's the stuff that'll get you remembered and get you put up there with some of the best, best players in the league. So really interesting. And he's such a young guy, so interesting to see how he goes throughout the rest of this series, because, if you want to start touching on the first series, I had this one as a sweep, whether it was Memphis or whether it was Golden State. I actually had Utah going with the sweep. What did you have?
Okay, here we go. No, I had Utah in 5.
Okay.
So still disappointing. I didn't think that's the game they'd get. I thought the game they would get would be one of the two they have at home, obviously.
Well, Memphis have played 3 games in the last 5 days, and Utah haven't played any. So, there's definitely that opportunity in game 1 to ride the momentum, and they were probably more ready to play a playoff style game than Utah were, because they've just played 3 of them in the last week.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think for me, it was a little bit of conflict with, the rust versus rest. Obviously the momentum was with Memphis, but how many games can you get up for, single elimination games? And it feels like they actually played 3 in a row, because if you want to go back to the first Golden State game,
exactly,
where they're fighting for that 8 seed, then obviously the one against Spurs and the second one against Golden State. So I thought surely they're due for a letdown. It's hard enough to win on the road, but to win, in Oracle or wherever, the Chase Center, I think it's called now. Sorry, but and then to go straight from obviously San Fran to Utah, it was like that Jazz home crowd, how dominant they've been all season. The 1 seed, a little bit of swagger with them this year, obviously knowing that they're the top dog compared to last year being were they the 4th seed or 5th seed? I was totally shocked by it. I mean, I thought, if we want to start speaking about that Utah were just sloppy, sluggish. They got killed in the turnover game. They had 16 to Memphis's 9. One thing that was surprising was Utah was actually up by 15 or 16 at one stage halfway through the second quarter. And there was a real opportunity there where that lead could have been pushed out to 20 plus, and Memphis just refused to let it happen. They stayed in the fight, and they brought it all the way back. And then obviously momentum was on their side heading into the second half, and they were able to really find, a hot stretch from Dylan Brooks, where they were just able to ride his hand. I think people don't give him enough credit for his ability to kind of get to the rim. He obviously is a big body. He can obviously, once he gets his shoulder pass, you finish pretty consistently around the rim. You obviously feel much better about defending him when he's out on the perimeter, because I think his shot still is streaky, but thing with the streaky guy is when it goes in and they, feel like the basket's as big as the ocean, it just spells a bit of trouble. Confidence players like that, you don't want to get him going. And I think from Utah, what hurt for their side is when you don't have Donovan Mitchell, you need the spark plug, you need the scoring. And it had to be Jordan Clarkson, and he wasn't that good. So 5 of 16 from the field. I think he finished with 14 or 15 points, but he was 0 of 8 from deep, and he had 4 turnovers himself in 30 minutes. So, obviously to account for, nearly 1/3 of the team's turnovers isn't great. I know he obviously just won 6th Man of the Year, and Ingles presented him the award. If those haven't seen the video, pretty cool moment there for Inside the NBA, where they did it, was it before the first hit this morning, where Ernie asked Clarkson and Ingles how many Utah Jazz players has won 6th Man of the Year, and Clarkson says 0, and then Ingles goes 1, and Clarkson's obviously looking confused, like, what? Who's won it? And then turns to Ingles, and Ingles is like pointing at him like it's you, and then hands him the trophy. So pretty wholesome moment there, pretty cool. I think just to go back to the game 1, I think that aspect of it was disappointing, because it's a 3-point game. If Clarkson, it's not his fault entirely, but if Clarkson shoots a little bit better from the field, if the team has a little bit less turnovers, potentially they find a way to win that game, despite all the things that, were going for Memphis and weren't really going for Utah. How do you feel?
I think, Utah, definitely didn't play a very strong offensive game. I thought that Mitchell was potentially going to get up for the first game of the series, but as soon as he was out, you thought Memphis still had potentially a chance to win. They didn't get much from their bench, a couple of threes from Niang, and a pretty solid overall game from Favors. But big thing that stands out to me is just the awful game that they got from Royce O'Neal. Like, I understand that he's a defensive stopper, but for him to play 36 minutes and go 1 for 6 for 3 points at a -13 plus minus, I felt like he didn't really give them anything at all. He's a guy who, has looked really plausible kind of all season long, but I get it, he's a role player, but when you're leaning on him for such heavy minutes, if he's not knocking down threes, then I think you need to look somewhere else, because, that seemed to be a big hole in their offense when they were able to swing the ball, rotate the ball to him, and he was open, and he wasn't necessarily able to make the necessary offensive plays, whether it was getting to the rim or shooting. I think Bogdanovic was outstanding in the second half. He really was in a zone and looked like they were going to take over and win the game. Conley was solid despite not playing much in the last 2 weeks. I thought he looked good. He looked like he was shooting the ball well, playing against his old club. And Gobert was really pretty dominant at the rim and rebounding the ball. He gave away a couple of silly fouls that I thought in the end probably cost them the game. Him getting fouled out with about 5 minutes to go. Quinn Snyder he rolled the dice when Gobert picked up his fifth with about 6 minutes to go. And then it only took 3 or 4 possessions before Gobert was holding Valanciunas on a rebounding opportunity, and then he was out. So from there, Memphis had about a 5 or 6 point lead at that stage. So that was kind of the telling reason why Utah weren't able to pull this one out in game one. But from taking a whole series approach to look at this particular matchup, I think, in M1, probably the best of Memphis, probably the best of what they can give you with Ja having such an efficient game. He ended up with 26 points and shooting over 50%. He kind of, the way that he controlled the game down the stretch, getting to the basket and pulling up for his teardrop floaters, that's a really part of his game that he looks to be really excelling at, is when he gets in that paint and doesn't go all the way to finish at the rim, but just stops a little bit short and just floats that ball up nice and softly. That's a really impressive part of his game, and we saw it on display. Valanciunas with a really strong match. Dylan Brooks basically 31 points, not far off his career high. So, and Anderson had a nice game, chipping in with 14 points and had 6 steals, which was huge for him. There was just enough from Memphis's bench to get them over the line. A couple of clutch plays from Grayson Allen, hit a couple of threes in overtime. Desmond Bain hit a couple of threes as well, and Tyus Jones came out of nowhere really for a couple of flukes. So to me, this kind of looks like, one of Memphis's really good performances of the season, and you just wonder whether they can replicate that kind of performance, for any of the remaining games in this series. I necessarily wouldn't be betting on it. I think you're probably right that I predicted it to be a sweep, but I don't really expect them to win game 2 at all. And then I think Utah will probably take a stranglehold on the series. Probably what's most interesting is to see whether Mitchell will be back soon, because the sooner he'll be back, I think the sooner this series might be over and done with. No disrespect to Memphis, but Utah, it's time to turn it up.
Yeah, you summed it up perfectly. I think if anything, you've probably just woken up the beast now, Utah, if they were, potentially took things a little bit light and thought, first game, number 1 seed. Memphis are obviously coming in, potentially going to be a letdown game after their big emotional, 2 or 3 game stretch. But yeah, I think Utah, it's apparently they'll get Donovan back, but I no longer believe what anyone says now with that until, you see him on the court, ready there once they throw the ball up between JV and Gobert, because every indication and every report was that he was going to get up for game 1. And then obviously went through warm-ups and something happened there with the medical staff where they spoke to, the coaching and Snyder and said, we don't think he should go. And, Mitchell and the team were then told the news that Mitchell wasn't going to play, which, obviously was a surprise to everyone. So yeah, hopefully he's good to go, because I think that gives him the kind of spark plug they need. And he's obviously the franchise guy, and, that'll give the rest of the team a boost, and people can potentially slide back into their role. Maybe Royce O'Neal doesn't have to take 6 shots a game now. He can go back to taking 2 or 3, and they could potentially be a bit better looks as well if Donovan's getting so much attention, and then they can get back to swinging the ball and, finding Rudy on cuts and lobs, and get back to that Utah basketball that we saw throughout the regular season and how dominant they were. So I think you summed it up perfectly there, Das. I would be very surprised if Memphis got another game. I can't see him being able to do too much, because as you say, it's about as good as a game as you could ask for from a lot of their guys. And for them to still only win by 3, I just don't know what more they can do.
The fatigue's probably going to settle in, I would say, after all the games they've played. Maybe the X factor might be Jaren Jackson, if he can all of a sudden start to play and maybe put up 20 points in a game and give them another dimension that could give them a chance. But I think we're both like Utah to handle this pretty quickly.
Yeah, perfect. Well, that slides us on probably then to the 2-7 matchup in the West. So it's obviously Phoenix Lakers.
Here we go.
which
Lakers.
obviously kicked off with the first game was yesterday, wasn't it? Or the day before? I might get my days wrong. So today is Tuesday, the 25th. So it was yesterday. Okay. I have Lakers in 6.
Lakers in 6. I've actually got Lakers in 5. I actually think that they might be able to get done a little bit quicker.
Okay, awesome.
But by the way, let's make sure that we made these picks before the first game of the playoffs. So,
yeah, good point.
We did not have a look and then decide, okay, now this is what I like. We had to go just from what we've seen all through the regular season. And I think a lot of people have picked the Lakers to win this series just because of the size mismatch.
Yeah,
there's definitely a bit of concern after watching the playing game that the Lakers, they don't look 100%. And I didn't get a lot of a chance to watch this first game of the series, but they only put up 90 points. So seems to be a lot of credit to the Suns and how they were able to kind of negate LeBron and AD. The leading scorer, LeBron, with 18 points for the Lakers. No one getting 20. That's pretty outstanding defense from Phoenix in this matchup. You got to think that where do the Lakers have an advantage against the Suns? And you got to think it's in the front court. But in this first game, Davis played basically the whole game, 38 minutes, goes 5 for 16, and he gets to the free throw line 5 times. Drummond only ends up playing 19 minutes. So he was a -4 in his time on the floor. So I guess first look at this kind of series, you're unsure whether the Lakers can completely capitalize on their size advantage. And probably the biggest thing in the box score that stood out to me in game 1 was a monster game from Ayton. They were just able to find him in the pick and roll, 10 of 11 from the field. He's finishing right around the basket with ease. Used his 3 fouls. He was a +16 overall, 16 boards to go along with it, and a block shot. So excellent game from Ayton. And it's good signs for Phoenix fans, and they've already got 1 win, and now another game at home. This game 2 is really, really big for how the rest of this series goes. How do you see it going?
So you're right in saying that the offense was bad from the Lakers side of things. I was able to watch majority of this game. I think just from the Lakers side of things, I find it very confusing how, for whatever reason, that they're really feels like they're trying to look for Drummond too much. I'm not exactly sure what you're hoping to get out of him by consistently looking to feed him all the time, whether it's you think you'll lose him and he won't be engaged if he's not getting his touches that potentially he was used to in past seasons with, not only Detroit, but the Cavs. But I think he's really bad. I think he's got to go. I think the best way for the Lakers forward is, and I know he doesn't like to play it, but I think this is actually a good matchup for him, Anthony Davis, to play the 5. Just full every time Davis steps on the court, he's the 5 man, no questions asked. I felt he was caught on the perimeter way too often in yesterday's game. He did have Crowder on him, and Crowder is physical, Crowder is good, but this is Anthony Davis we're talking about. When he's going, he's potentially, one of the best players in the league. So I want to see him in the.
Could they use Gasol? Could they use Gasol at all? Do you reckon? Because he's not as athletic as Drummond, but he's a much smarter defender. I feel like there is a risk, but
I would just really prefer to. Well, when they do that, the probably Suns or guards will be doing everything they can to just switch out to him on the perimeter and try and cook him, similar to what they did against Utah with Gobert. Just try and find the big man that may potentially doesn't have the lateral quickness to just absolutely abuse. But yeah, I think that the 8 matchup's actually a good one for AD if he's going to play the 5. I wouldn't be too concerned about, banging bodies with Ayton. He's more of a finesse type player, pick and roll. He's just going to roll to the rim. And when he gets the ball in the post, he's always looking to, face up, as we've spoken about in the past. So it won't be a very brutal series for Davis defensively. And then it obviously spaces the floor completely by having AD, playing the 5 on offense. And I think it can then really open up the Lakers and their options and really, get them into favorable positions because I didn't think it was just AD that was the issue. I know a lot of people can look to it and go, that's not enough, 14 points in, 38 minutes. LeBron didn't seem, very locked in. It seemed like he was a few times, and this happened in the Golden State game early. He had Wiggins on him, And I don't know if you remember it, but LeBron sort of half drove in and took a shot. Wiggins blocked him, and LeBron got the ball back and kind of chucked it up, and it was a shot clock violation. This was kind of early in the game when everything was going well for Golden State in that playing game. But a similar thing happened with Bridges. And I guarantee if LeBron wants to put his head down and go to the rim, like, he can pretty much get there at will, or he'll draw a foul. And for some reason, it felt like he just wasn't prepared to go all the way and do that. Again, it could be because of his injury, could be a lingering concern. I know he came back and played the Pelicans and then, or was it the Pacers? It was either the Pelicans or the Pacers where he rolled it kind of for like a second time after coming back. So potentially there's a little bit of, let's say, hesitation to put himself in a potential situation where he could injure it again. I'm not too sure, but I think, I expect the Lakers to come out and be 10 times better as they were in game one. If anyone remembers from the bubble, they lost both game ones in their first two series. They lost it to Portland, if you remember, and then they lost in the second round to Houston, game one as well. And so, the Lakers can be primed to doing this sort of thing. Similar to Utah, it could potentially be a bit of a wake-up call for a few of their guys that, they've just got to be so much better. Otherwise, Phoenix are no scrubs. Yes, it's potentially a bad matchup for them, but that doesn't mean they're just going to, not try and just let you do whatever you want. They're still going to compete. They're going to fight hard. That they have so many guys that are not willing to throw in the towel. Even if you want to look at a guy like Campaign that just, gets himself ejected because he's just trying to be physical. He's trying to make sure he's competing for everything. Doesn't want to let potentially Caruso outmuscle him, and all of these guys have a point to prove. So I think from the Lakers side of things, you can expect a much better effort game two. I think I think if I was them, their game plan, just let Booker go off. Like, so what? I get he was unbelievable in game one, but they tried to double him. They tried to throw some different looks at him that just didn't work. And he had 8 assists in that game, despite the 34 points. So 34, 8 and 7. He played nearly the whole game. I feel like he played 40 plus minutes. And along with Ayton was one of the key reasons as to why they were able to win that game one. But yeah, I think the summaries expect a much better Lakers performance in game two. I'd be pretty shocked if they lost it.
A pretty awesome performance from Booker in his first playoff game.
Yeah,
he really, we didn't expect for it to take this long in his career for him to get there, but he's obviously shown us why he's one of the toughest guards in the league. And, he's basically showing to me why I put him on my All-NBA third team, because he's as tough as anyone.
You love this. You love this.
Well, I do like it. Him and Tatum were going off after I put them in my All-NBA teams. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, LeBron's been in a lot of playoff series, and this Lakers team, they went all the way last year. So you can never overreact too much to one game in particular. And like you said, it sounds like from what you've seen that the Lakers were really flat in this one, and kind of tried to stay in it, but with only scoring 90 points, it just looked like it kind of wasn't their night. And they're probably a little bit flat after what happened in that kind of miraculous win against Golden State. The Phoenix looked like they come out ready to play. Chris Paul was looking to find other people. 36 minutes, only 7 points. He's trying to get his teammates involved, trying to make sure that it's not just him, kind of doing the be all and end all of the team, which you have fears that what it might become at the end of the series when it gets really tight. When it comes to closeout games, you have a fear that it might just be Chris Paul kind of us hoping for him to be the guy down the stretch to hit all these clutch shots. Great to see Ayton got off to a good start in the series for them. Their bench looked like they were quite productive. And, if they're able to hit 3-point shots and get these guys involved and get the kind of the game on their tempo, it'll be really interesting to see if they can push this to like a deep series that'll go 6 or 7 games. Definitely, it's a series of adjustments, and the Lakers, they've come out in this first game, come out flat, got beaten quite easily, but how are they going to respond is really important. That if they're able to flip the script and take home court advantage away from the Suns in game 2, then all of a sudden there's a lot of pressure back on Phoenix in game 3 once they come to LA, because only 2 weeks ago Phoenix got beaten by 25 points with the LeBron-less Lakers in LA. So this game 2 is huge for momentum. And there's only a couple guys on Phoenix team that have that playoff experience. When you look at Crowder and you look at Chris Paul, maybe a little bit of Saric, but this Lakers team has been there and done that. And I suppose they know that this series is far from over just because of what happened in game one. And you definitely, if you're Phoenix, you don't want to think that you've got it figured out just because you beat the Lakers quite handily in game one. So this will be a series that very keen to see what happens in the next one, because as this gets tighter and tighter, a 2-game lead in this series is absolutely monstrous. So this is definitely the tightest. This could have been a Western Conference Finals. The Lakers, they've fallen down the standings. This really is potentially, a couple of the very best teams in the West. So yeah, looking forward to the next matchup and seeing that one quite tightly.
Yeah, well, the one thing that I'll sort of extend off what you were saying with, the Lakers sort of starting slow, but they've obviously got the history of being able to take out, the championship, especially LeBron as well. Not only just with the Lakers, but his past couple teams. But I compare that to what Tom Brady always talks about with the Super Bowl, how playing in the actual Super Bowl game itself is such a long game, because obviously the pregame and then you play, and then the halftime show is, over an hour or just under an hour itself. And so you don't want to get too hype. You don't want to get too up in terms of the first half, and because then you'll burn out, you'll fatigue out, and you won't be, you'll sort of, as you say, fade out in that second half. And that's potentially what happened to the Falcons a couple of years ago in that playoff series where they blew the 28-3 Super Bowl. Sorry. So not to get too sidetracked, but yeah, I think I can kind of see in that aspect that LeBron is never really a guy to come out and always blow the doors off. He's a little bit slower to get going, but I think there's enough there to think he'll fire up the boys. And I could see him going on to win, the next 3, and then something like Phoenix really push hard to force a game back in Phoenix for game 6. So that's sort of how I'm reading it. But I think that sort of leads us on to another game 2, Dust, that's absolutely pivotal for the other LA team. So the 3-6 matchup is the Clippers against your Mavs. So that took place. Was that yesterday as well? I feel like that was 2 days ago. Day before.
Yeah.
So that took place on Sunday. So with it being your team, floor is yours, Das.
Okay. 21 years old, this kid is.
No, what did you have? What was your prediction?
Oh, prediction for the series.
And then you can start. Yeah, prediction first, and then you can start talking about it.
This one was hard because you got to go with your head over your heart when you're talking about.
Do you?
The bracket and who you think will win. I genuinely think the Mavs are a strong chance to win this one. But if I had to put all the money I had on it, I would still go with the Clippers because of their roster and their depth. They've got 2 potential All-NBA players. A guy who's won multiple championships, a guy who, I love Luka, and he is an absolute superstar. And that's why I reckon it'll go 7 games, but I reckon it might just be too much for us to win that 7th game on the road in LA. I think that might just be a little bit too much for us. So I've got the Clippers advancing in 7 games. What do you got?
Okay, interesting. Yep. I've got the same thing. I've got Clippers in 7. I thought you were going to take your Mavs. That surprises me.
I want them to get through. We've had a good season, a little bit turbulent, but I still think that we're a little bit similar to a lot of these teams in the playoffs who are hoping to become champions, that when it comes down to it, we're a little bit one-dimensional when it comes to superstar talent. It's going to have to be Luka getting it done with monstrous numbers for us to advance in this series. And you know what? He did it in game 1. 21 years old, this guy's already getting it done against some of the best defenders in the league. 31, 10, and 11, a steal and 2 blocks. 45% shooting, knocked down 5 threes, which was team high, which was huge. Only 3 turnovers. So he was really basically flawless in this matchup against the Clippers. They bought Pat Bev out to the beginning to try to hustle him a little bit. He just big boyed him, rocked the baby on him easily, got to the basket. And then when they put on Batum on him for a little bit, he was able to step back and get his 3 over him, use his quickness. He was facilitating all game long. He was able to get Porzingis involved a little bit. He found Dorian Finney-Smith some big time threes. He hit 4, which was huge for for spacing the floor. If we're able to hit a few 3-pointers, the lane really opens up for Luka. Another 4 3-pointers for Hardaway Jr. Actually 5. He's been on a ridiculous tear, and I would say to anyone out there to go check out the JJ Redick podcast, because he just had Tim Hardaway on there. A really interesting little conversation with him, because Hardaway is definitely playing the best ball of his career. And, we spoke about this at the beginning of the season. Now he's probably very, very important to us as our third option. And I guess the key to the series, besides Luka needing to be extremely consistent, is, how much are we going to get out of Porzingis? What did you think of Porzingis' performance in that first game?
Yeah, not great. So potentially, that just to go off the back of your Hardaway point, maybe Hardaway is the number 2 guy. Maybe he is. Well, if we don't see any more,
he knows where his shots are coming from. His shots are cemented in our offensive flow and what it's going to take for us to win. So he could still, get the job done and give us 20 points per game, hopefully throughout this whole series. But it might not be enough if we don't get something out of Kristaps,
Yeah, I've always found Kristaps such a weird one, because he's shown flashes where he can be absolutely dominant and almost the best guy on the court, and sometimes even outperform. I think it was it a home game against Denver, in the regular season there, where KP just went berserk, over 30 points, monstrous on the boards, was definitely made himself known. But I think there's too often where you just watch Dallas games and you're like, wait, KP's out there, like he's playing minutes. He can just not get himself involved. I know he's obviously a perimeter oriented type player. You rarely sort of see him in the post, but yeah, I think there's got to be dominance,
see the defense and rebounding and the block shots. You want to see that.
Absolutely. So there's just, I don't know. It's potentially just the thing I'll say as well is he just never seems to sort of be, it always seems like he's angry. I'll say that. It used to seem like in New York he was having fun, and the game was coming easy to him, and the crowd sort of loved him, and he would get involved off the back of that. He would always be in some way, shape, or form, highlight dunks or protecting the rim, never giving up. If you remember all the way back to Summer League, it was actually Dallas against Philly in Vegas there. And it was the year we drafted Jahlil Okafor. And it was obviously the year you guys drafted KP. And sorry, not you guys. Sorry. When I say you guys, I mean the Knicks. And everyone was thinking, oh, here we go. Like Okafor was absolute stud in college, just such a beast in the post, was able to do whatever he wanted. And KP just like would refuse to like give in. Coming in potentially as this European that was sort of lanky and didn't have much size behind him and was sort of getting used to playing the game. And he came in and he shocked everyone. He was spacing the floor, hitting some trays. He was really doing a great job of making life so hard on Jahlil Okafor. And people were like, whoa, this guy could be something. And now, I don't know, it never feels like he's ready to take on challenges. It never feels like it's very far and few between where you see a real dominant KP performance. I think was the game where he played the Pacers as well ages ago, where Luka didn't play and KP had 16 plus rebounds and 30 points, and it's just I want to see it all the time. Like he should be just as much as Luka demands the ball and gets frustrated and gets pissed off at teammates and potentially gets pissed off at refs. You kind of want to see a little bit out of KP with that. It feels like at times he's just more than happy to settle. If there's an easy jumper to take, he'll take. He's willing to take shortcuts as opposed to just really, really make his defender work and putting him in a dangerous position. Like he's got size. Why doesn't he just, the Anthony Davis thing, how off a free throw, he'll just post up a guy or try and seal a guy and LeBron throws it to him straight away. Could we get some KP of doing that? Because he's so tall. It doesn't necessarily matter about strength. Just get it and put it in. Like it feels like it's jump shot or bust at the moment with him.
There's definitely a little bit of frustration. I think when you talk about his best stretch of performing at a high level, I think the bubble was probably some of the best basketball he's ever played. He was so dominant offensively and was able to stay on the floor the whole game and was a big part about our run through to, winning a couple games against the Clippers. I think the I suppose you can definitely point with KP to kind of the injuries that he suffered and kind of how horrific it was for him to like do his ACL on a big dunk attempt, and he's never really got back that, you know, that aggressiveness and that quickness defensively that you talked about, that you saw from him at the beginning of, you know, the beginning of his career in even in the summer league. Because he, with that size and that length, you know, he, with a bit of agility and a bit of go-get attitude defensively, he could be everywhere. You know, he can change shots, he can, you know, recover back to his man, block shots on the perimeter. You know, if he can move his feet quick enough, he can stay in front of some guys as well. But, you know, there hasn't been a lot of evidence that he's able to, you know, lock in defensively and move his feet well and stay in front of people, at least during the regular season. But I am a little bit optimistic that maybe, you know, he's taken quite a bit of time off recently. Is he able to give us, you know, a really big effort here in this playoff run? Because I feel like he's had all the time in the world to rest, you know, and he was able to perform well in the playoffs last year. Why not him come out and, you know, really show us something defensively and give us a big lift? Like when you talk about him being, you know, the second option to Luka in our team, they've spoken about it before during the season that they get along well and they are teammates who trust each other and want to win together, but they're not best friends. They're not best mates. You know, they don't. I'm sure that Luka doesn't necessarily think that Kristaps is getting the best out of his game, you know, and Kristaps, there may be a little bit of jealousy in terms of look how young this kid is and how, you know, how better of a number one option he is than, you know, anything on our team, including what I've got when I was basically number one option in New York. But that doesn't mean that, you know, he can't give us a really huge performance and potentially, you know, swing this series in our favor. One guy that I'm a little bit scared about is, you know, Serge Ibaka. He was a plus 15 in this game and only played limited minutes off the bench. I think there's no doubt that if the Clippers want to go further in the playoffs, that they need to start to unleash him, you know, in their closing lineup as their center, because of his versatility and his ability to shoot the ball and his experience. You know, he's got a massive frame, a big body that could potentially cause some problems for our big guys, particularly KP. So I look at that matchup as a really big one in terms of whether the Mavs could potentially get over the Clippers in this series.
Yeah, well, I think you'd expect, just due to Ibaka obviously coming back from injury, that he'd start to get his minutes ramped up a little bit more and you'd see more of him, you know, on the floor than Zubac. And so then as a result, that would obviously make the KP piece really important to stay with Serge, obviously, on defense there. If they do a classic, you know, pick and pop, or even if they get Serge in that mid-post, mid-range area, they need a guy that can stay with him, you know, not only on the perimeter, but then down low to contest his shots. And we've seen it in the past, the sample where when KP's engaged, it's about as it's not Gobert-like, but he has that length that can really disturb you, you know, just being able to contest shots. So I think that the key piece there, as you say, is you're going to need him engaged just for the factor to match it, at least with Serge. You got to at least match it. If Serge comes on and is giving them, the Clippers, more than KP's giving the Mavs, then that's where things could really turn. Yeah, I think you're right.
I think you're right about how important this game too is. You can draw a great parallel to what's happening in where it's at after game one in the Lakers series, you know, because, you know, people would consider that first game an upset, and, you know, the Mavericks could rest on their laurels and say, hey, look, we've got home court advantage. Let's come home and try to win our games at home and then win the series. But the reality is that we've been a poor team at home this whole season. You know, we've really struggled to win multiple games in a row at home all year. We haven't had any kind of streak. So I feel like this second game is hugely important, not only because the Clippers will make a bunch of adjustments and potentially deploy their very best lineups on us, but also if the Mavericks are able to give a great performance and somehow steal game two, then all of a sudden we've got a complete strangled hold on the series. So for me, it's like, you know, the Mavs should be deploying all of their assets to try and dominate this game too. Because if we win that, and then we're talking about a huugh shift in who's got the leverage on who's going to, you know, potentially control the outcome of this series. So game two is huge. You know, they're definitely going to put everything on Luka. They're going to make it extremely difficult for him. He kind of had his way. He was able to, you know, get where he wanted to get, was able to shoot the step backs when he wanted to, and he knocked them down. But it's definitely not going to be comfortable for Luka in game 2, and I can't wait to see if he rises to the challenge.
Yeah, so that's a great point to sort of extend on. If you're going to go off Ty Lue's post-game press conference from game 1, then expect to see the claw on Luka. So didn't really do much of that in game 1, as you said, Beverly, Batum, but not a ton of either PG or Kawhi that saw any significant minutes on Luka.
Hell of a luxury.
So
hell of a luxury to have.
You know, and I've heard a lot of people speak about it recently as well, that when people first thought about that blockbuster trade, you know, obviously getting PG from OKC and then signing Kawhi in free agency, that you just thought about it from a defensive perspective, and you're like, how are you going to score? Like, okay, you potentially get to switch off Kawhi, but then you've got PG defending you. So like, how's that an advantage? So let's actually see it unleashed. And I'll speak about that as well. Actually seeing a really good defensive player on the best offensive player is something I want in one of these series. I'll speak about the other time, but yeah, I think Kawhi and Luka will be fascinating. But yeah, the Clippers will give it their all. I mean, if you want to talk about anything in regards to adjustments, how about they just shoot the ball a bit better? Like, they shot 27% from deep, 11 of 40, and they shot over 40% during the regular season. Yeah. So Dallas won despite 8 less field goal attempts as a team and committing 8 more turnovers. So that's crazy that you guys were able to win by, you know, double digits there with the large discrepancy, shooting 8 less times as a team and turning the ball over 8 more times. Like, I couldn't get over that when I saw that stat after the game. So just sort of goes to show potentially how bad the Clippers really did shoot the ball. You'd expect them to be a real kitchen sink type game, you know, with everyone talking about, oh, here we go. Could they not choke, because I guess they've never really had the lead, but could they potentially blow another good opportunity to at least get to the Western Conference Finals? And then you start to look at, do we blow it up? Will Kawhi want to come back? All of that stuff.
They tanked those last 2 games to make sure they got us in the matchup. So for them to lose
the
first 2 at home would be, you know, they wouldn't be saving any face with that.
No, exactly right. So as you say, a couple of enormous game 2s tomorrow for both LA teams. So we'll definitely be tuning into that. Okay, so that takes us to the 4-5 battle, right? Is that? I think it is 4-5. Okay, so Denver, Portland. Your prediction for that one?
I've got Denver in 6. I think
huge.
Jokic's too good. I got them in 6.
I have Portland in 6. So
okay,
interesting. So we both got them in 6. Yeah. So for me, after watching the last couple of games, so this is one of the teams other than the Bucks Milwaukee series that we'll speak about that have actually played 2 games. So for me, Das, I think this series is going to come down to a battle of the benches. So if you want to look at game 1, Portland got 34 off their bench and Denver only got 20. So Denver lost that by 14. And then in game 2 today, Portland had 14 points off the bench. Denver had 36. So they won by 22. They won the bench points. So I think that's going to be a bit of a consistent theme, because I think the battle of, you know, if you just want to look at Jokic against Dame, I think for the most part, they'll rule each other out. I think you can expect both of them to show up every night, be a real, obviously, key strength to their team. But yeah, it's going to come down to the other guys, I think, and specifically the bench. An issue potentially with Portland is their depth that has been questioned. Trying to potentially rely on a lot of Simons, who was good in game 1 for bench minutes off the guard spot. You then
did nothing in game 2.
Did nothing today, and then the same can be said about Melo. He was terrific off the bench in game 1, 4 or 5 from deep. I think he gave him 18 points, and today he might have had 4 or 5 on, you know, really poor shooting.
He was a minus 24.
Yeah,
minus 24 with 5 fouls.
Yeah, so for me, it's a battle of the benches. That's where I can see the difference coming. And so far, game 1 and 2 has reflected that. Whichever bench has given you more points, it's normally meant the other team's won. So interesting that it's been Portland winning by double digits and then Denver winning by double digits. Will it be that, or will it be, you know, a one possession type game coming down the stretch in any of these next few games? Because so far it's kind of been comfortable win. So will there be a really close game in one of these next few? That's what I'm looking out for.
Portland have been so unpredictable. I guess what we do know about them is predictably, teams go off against them basically every game, and sometimes it's still not enough. It feels like Denver can have their way offensively in terms of scoring, and I just thought the game from Jokic today was unbelievable. It was MVP level stuff. He was destroying them. Like, all the coverage that they were doing to him, he was reading it, making the right decision, whether it was passing or, okay, this time it's Nurkic on me on the elbow. I've got to go to the body, go to the basket and score on him. Okay, we're running some action. We're doing the pick and roll. They're helping a little bit. I've got to come to the high post and knock down that jump shot. The efficiency in the way he was playing today was just, it's the reason he's the MVP. In only 31 minutes, he was able to drop 38 points. We talk about how much better he's got as a scorer. Yeah, he dropped 5 dimes as well. He shot 15 of 20 from the field. This guy is just reading defenses like nothing else, making every possible open shot. He's just been so consistent. A couple of threes, 6 of 6 at the free throw line. He's controlling everything that they do. And when he's scoring the ball so well, he runs handoff action with Michael Porter Jr. and Porter Jr. is really solidifying himself as a bona fide scoring option. He looks just as likely as McCollum to go get them a bucket when they need it. And I thought they got a really impressive game from Gordon today. He really got on the end of some nice play, got out in the fast break and showed off his athleticism a little bit. Campazzo gave him a little bit. He's taken that role of irritant against Dame. He's taken that
against
responsibility.
CJ.
As long as he doesn't foul out, yeah, it was big. As long as he doesn't give tech fouls away and he just makes it difficult for Dame. Just make Dame work, because obviously it's going to be very difficult to stop Dame. But I actually thought today, despite Dame's unbelievable shooting from 3, 9 of 16, that's just stupid. That's absolutely ridiculous shooting from him. We come to expect that. He only ends up on 45% overall shooting, so he dropped 42, which was awesome. 11 of 13 at the free throw line. So he got there quite a lot, which can be difficult for defenses. But, they held him under 50% shooting. And I suppose they were able to be more efficient offensively, Denver, and kind of make it a one-man show for Dame. And that was kind of the only way I felt that Portland were going to get themselves back into this game was on the back of a Dame super game. So I guess they kind of, in this one game, they kind of stretched Portland down to the bone. We didn't see much from Powell, and Covington was basically looking inept offensively out there, despite playing 37 minutes, only giving him 3 points. I know Dame was shooting it a lot, but you've got to give us some more Covington if you're going to be out on the floor for 37 minutes. I think Nurkic is probably a humongous key because he's really the only guy who can even try to match up with Jokic on this team. He fouled out in this one. And when he was on the floor, they were actually dead even on plus minus. So Nurkic, it's tough to expect him to be able to play the whole game throughout multiple games in this series, but it's going to take that for them to win. Jokic is just so dominant.
Yeah, well, I think the real key point there, potentially just in this game alone, was so obviously Jokic went off, did his thing in game 1, but the team still lost. He only had 1 assist. Potentially there was a little bit of, other guys not getting involved. And today it was Dame did his thing. I think he still had 10 assists or very close to it, 8 or 9 assists. But it felt like that hot streak when Dame was obviously going ballistic there to end the first half. I think he had 6 or 7 threes in the second quarter alone. As good as that is for your team, it obviously then means there's a lot of minutes where CJ isn't touching the ball, a lot of minutes where Powell isn't, a lot of minutes where Nurkic isn't. So
CJ was 9 of 12 in this game. So he was great. He was good. He needed more shots. Really.
He attempts 19 a game, does. So to only have 12, it's obviously it was Dame's night, and you want to keep feeding the man that's hot. But you still got to make sure you're putting pressure on the defense as well yourself and the other guys. So you just got to be able to get stops. You give up 128 points, you're not going to win games when you give up 128 in regulation. You can't get on runs and cut into leads if you're giving up that many baskets. They gave up 12 to Monte Morris off the bench, who I thought was really good. Monte Morris is 7 assists as well, I think, from him.
Yeah, important that they've got him back. Millsap was able to chip in with 15.
He was great.
Yeah, that's a guy who Portland wanted to get potentially in the offseason, and Denver convinced him to come back. So, if he's able to get 15 points, you get double digits from Campazzo and Gordon. It's just not enough defense, not enough lockdown from Portland for them to win this one. A lot on the shoulders of Dame, it seems like, every time. And whether that's, a formula that can ultimately get them where they want to go, it still remains unclear.
Yeah, well, they played a bit of Derek Jones Jr. today. So I think that was a little bit of shit. We need something defensively because for the most part, I think Melo Melo had 5 fouls today, but he doesn't give you a ton of defensive options anyway. And it was interesting because Jones Jr. was a key part of the rotation early in the season. And then obviously when they acquired Norm Powell, he sort of took up the minutes there of Derek Jones. So he sort of fell out of the rotation and they just went with their 8 guys. They have the 5 starters and then they have Cantor, Melo and Simons off the bench. So interesting to see Derek Jones get a bit of run. Potentially, if they need to suddenly go, shit, we need more of a defensive lineup around, a couple of our real go-to scorers. Do they need to look at a Rondé Hollis-Jefferson or someone like that that can just come in and give him some minutes of just defensive versatility and aggression and focus? And because you're right, I mentioned all these points about the bench scoring and whatnot, but if Portland can't stop anyone, like what are we doing here? That's going to be the biggest issue.
They would kill for some Zach Collins right now. They would absolutely kill for it. He was actually such an integral part of them going to the Western Conference Finals 2 years ago. He was big for them in that series against Denver, albeit that's a younger Jokic. He's a much more complete all-around player at the moment. And by no means do I think Collins could lock him down, but he would certainly give them a lot more help and give some relief to Nurkic, who, it doesn't look like he's any match for Jokic right now. I think for me, after seeing a couple of games, I don't think there's any way that you can think Portland are going to win the series if Jokic keeps cutting them up like he was in this game.
No, I don't really feel good about the pick, to be honest. But you just get it's potentially you're just going to need not only 40 from Lillard, you're going to need 30 plus from CJ to keep it close and to match. Because if it's going to just be a scoring type game and a shootout, maybe you just lean into that, kind of how the Wizards do it. We can speak about we'll speak about the Wizards next anyway. But yeah, maybe Portland, because they don't have the defensive guys to be able to sort of match it with Denver in terms of getting stops. So maybe you just lean into it and go, look, we're an offensive team. Let's just try and shoot the crap out of the ball and really put a lot of pressure for Denver to make sure that they're scoring the ball as well to keep up with us in a bit of a track meet. Because as you say, you can't really rely on Portland to be able to do anything defensively at the moment. So yeah, look, I don't feel great about it. But at the end of the day, Portland do have Dame Lillard. They do have the clear advantage in the backcourt with obviously CJ alongside him as well. So that does give me a little bit of hope. But yeah, so far I would probably lean Denver if I had my time again. I still do think the series is going to be close. I actually think this is another potential series that'll go 7. That could go all the way. I don't know if Denver could get back any more guys like a Will Barton or someone like that. I saw him on the sideline today. Okay, he's still a chance to come back.
It would be huge for them. I'm not sure if he is, but that would
really push things to Denver's favor. That's for sure if he can come back. Okay, now the East. So start off with Philly against the Wizards. So the 1v8. You know what I had for this. So.
Yeah, I think we've both got a sweep here.
Yeah.
Washington, it's just, what do they need to win a game against the team with the second or third best record in the league? They need some kind of monstrous interior game from Alex Len and a great effort from Gafford. They need basically Bertans to go off, and he actually did hit a few threes in game 1, showed some form. And then you need a monstrous triple-double from Westbrook to supersede whatever Simmons is giving the Sixers. And then you need Beal to basically go for 40 and go out of his mind and score even a little bit more than his ridiculously high average of 30 a game. That's literally what you need just to win one game. So that makes it really, really difficult. And you expect to be the best player in this series. And, you couldn't ask much easier if you're Joel Embiid. We've got a broken, basically, center rotation in the front court for Washington that they've thrown together in the last month. So, you expect some barbecue chicken for Embiid for this whole series, and yeah, we both expect a sweep.
Yeah, so I think just with this first game in particular, second game is they actually have a bit of a break. It's not tomorrow; it's Thursday. I think is game 2. So they've had a good 4 days or 3 days at least between games 1 and 2, which is normally rare. It's normally you play, a day or two later. So interesting that the schedule's worked out that way. Potentially give Philly some time to stew on it because we weren't that good, Das. I know you mentioned before the pod you couldn't catch it. I wouldn't blame you because it tipped off at 3 a.m. So that obviously would have ruled out quite a lot of people in Australia in particular if they weren't diehard. You're not going to get up at 3 a.m. to start your, Monday morning. But yeah, I think just a weird game for anyone that did sort of tune in and watch. Philly were pretty sluggish to start. They had a double-digit lead halfway through the first quarter, but then a little bit of Ish Smith and the Wizards refusing to just throw in the towel. They came back and then took the lead in the second quarter and then took the lead going into halftime. So you got about as good of a game out of a lot of the Wizards bigs as you could hope for. I mean, Gafford was enormous, crushing the glass, being just a lob threat. And that really put a lot of pressure on us. It's kind of weird because you'd think similar to, Utah, Philly, number 1 seed, lock up home court, really good regular season, come out and just obliterate the opponent, and the opposite happened. So, something that never really happened during the regular season was Embiid getting in foul trouble, and he picked up a couple of early fouls and was never really able to, because normally he plays the whole first quarter. But obviously, as a result, he left early in the first quarter, came back to start the second quarter, and that's where he really had to get going.
Only 29 minutes.
Yeah, so obviously well below where you'd expect him to be in a, 7-point game in the end, 8-point game. But the difference here was, look, it was a typical Simmons game. He was pretty funny, missed all 6 of his free throw attempts, but still contributed by having 15 and 15 for rebounds and assists. A combination of him...
15 assists, 2 turnovers. He was
that's pretty good.
Controlling the game against Westbrook. He basically beat him in his own game there.
Yeah. So then defensively as well, obviously you were throwing a lot of Simmons, and if not Simmons, then Thibault on Beal. And Beal did a good job. He got to the rim more often than you would have liked. I think a key thing here was because Philly was so sluggish, the home crowd played a massive part in making sure we just didn't let that one slip. It was obviously good to have fans back, and I know we can speak about it in one of these games because you really felt it in one of these other Eastern Conference games, that the fans being back, that's for sure. But I think in the end, thank the Lord for Tobias Harris because we really needed his scoring. With obviously Ben not giving you much offensively. Seth Curry was okay, but he got started a little bit late. He was pretty slow to kick things off and got going later in the game. But yeah, it was really important to get, I think it was 34 or 36 out of Tobias there in a game that potentially could have swung the way of the Wizards 37. If a few calls went their way. He had 37, Tobias. Okay, even better than I thought. So that on high efficiency as well. So really important because similar to what we saw in the play-in game between the Wizards and the Celtics, the Wizards just don't have anyone to throw at a wing scorer like a Tatum, like a Harris. So that's where we need Tobias to stay ultra aggressive throughout the game. And yeah, that was really important because, gosh, if a few things went the Wizards' way, potentially they could have stole that one.
Yeah, well, you can't blame. I don't think you can blame Philly for taking them lightly. They're a team who was a 10th seed. Only a week out from the play-in tournament. So they've got the matchups on them. Simmons is good an athlete and got as much size as you'd ever want defending against Westbrook. Beal obviously is a bit of a handful, but Embiid also is a monstrous handful as well. Harris showed that he was ready for the playoffs. I know he's rested a few games or been citing an injury the last few games of the regular season. It's really good to see that Philly have got a healthy lineup. They've got their full list out there. Curry been dealing with injury on and off for the whole season, but to have him out there, Embiid's had a bit of foul trouble, but still got 12 free throws, still dropped 30. That's what you expect from him. He gets it done. Simmons, I like this game. I thought it was big for him because he hasn't really been having a massive imprint on the game and on the box score for, it feels like, a month or two now. He's just kind of been cruising through his role and doing his job defensively. But I thought it was a big game for him. And, when you look at their lineup, it is balanced well, and their 1 through 8, 1 through 9 feels pretty set for them to go deep run into this playoffs. I know it's just a first round, but this is when you start to build that confidence and that continuity that they can actually go all the way and do it. When, crucial acquisitions for them in the offseason, Curry and Green, in a game where they weren't playing their best, let Washington in a little bit. Both of them were able to knock down 3 triples. And, that's on not a lot of shots. They can give you 18 points, and that's big. That's a big difference in the game, and something that Philly have probably missed in previous seasons when they've gone deep into the playoffs. What did you think about George Hill off the bench? He had probably his best game for Philly, and he could potentially, build. I would expect him to kind of break his way into this rotation as this playoff run goes deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely his best game since being a Sixer. It was nice because obviously a little bit of concern there of what his role would be in this team, because if Curry and Green are stroking the ball from deep, you probably wouldn't take them out of the closing 5, and you're obviously not going to take Tobias, Embiid, and Ben out of the closing 5. So where does Hill sort of fit in that? But he was really stable off the bench. I think that's where it came in handy. It's when Ben's not on the floor that you need that sort of stability, and he provided that nicely. It's something we haven't had for a long time. Just a veteran presence like that we've sort of been dying out for. But obviously, no veteran was going to want to come to Philly, 4 years ago, when we were really struggling there for a while. But I think there's that's something that we didn't really have to see a ton of in this game in particular, but it will come in handy, is his IQ and defensive potential, versatility to just be smart, be a pest, because we're obviously going to come up against some tough guards as we progress through. If we potentially have to face I don't want to speak about it and call it too early, but if we do have to face an Atlanta, potentially there, if how good Trae Young is at causing people to foul him, we may need some George Hill minutes there to really match up against Trae and try and take him out of the game. So I think he'll be more and more important as the playoffs go on, and he'll definitely have a big moment or two where gets a defensive stop, takes a charge, reads a pass and steals the ball, just makes a big 3, swings momentum. So I think we'll really see George Hill's value in the further we go into the playoffs.
Yeah, lessens that reliance on a guy like Milton, who's been a little bit more inconsistent.
Yeah,
a guy who both of us like, but I think Hill's probably a safer bet for them in their rotation. But yeah, not too much trouble for Philly in this series. They got out of jail in that game 1. I expect them to probably stomp them in game 2.
Yeah, definitely. The interesting thing, I'll probably finish on with that, is what I was saying before about Portland, and Portland leaning into, okay, we're not a defensive team, let's just get out and run and gun. Well, that's what the Wizards do to a T. If anyone, well, again, say it again, don't expect many people to have watched that first game. But if you did, it was like a regular season game. There was nothing really playoff-like about it. Wasn't a slog. It wasn't tough to get buckets. It was just run and gun every time either side had the ball. And especially the Wizards, they were really leaning into their style of play. So something I'd like Portland to do. Because obviously if you're going to give up 120, you got to find a way to score 125 on the other end. So exactly. That's what the Wizards do, and expect them to continue doing that throughout the series. They have no reason to lean into trying to become a defensive team, because they're definitely not that. So that's we'll leave it with that. I agree. I think Philly take care of the next 3, and the series is done. So the 2-7 matchup, Das, between Brooklyn and Boston. Where do you sit on that?
I sit with the sweep. I think it's over for Boston. Yeah, I didn't think Boston were going to get through, but they caught Washington on an off day, it looks like. So they made it in, and they just don't have enough to go with Brooklyn. Brooklyn, the lineup that they're putting out there on the floor is all their guys. They're actually not missing anyone. So it's hard to pick Boston in any individual game when you look at the talent that they're going up against on the other side. You got a sweep too?
Yeah, got a sweep too. So it's funny you say that. Now that they have all their guys. In the first game of this series, it was only the 9th time this season that Kyrie, KD, and Harden have played together. So there's still a little bit of stuff they need to fix and get used to. But I think the scary thing is just how bad they played in the first half. In that first game, Boston almost played a perfect first half. Yet you were never worried about the Nets losing that. They were down 6 going into the break. It felt like they just flicked a switch for a 2 or 3 minute period, and then before you knew it, it was a double-digit win to Brooklyn. So it's obviously a scary thought. Most teams can't match up against that sort of prowess and offensive firepower, but especially Boston. It obviously didn't help that they had a Kemba in foul trouble because they really need his scoring alongside Tatum. But the one pleasing thing I think I'll like before I bore people with any more sort of chat, everyone knows about how good Brooklyn will be. Really good to see KD defending Tatum. I love that. Obviously, Tatum wasn't able to have his way too often, but yeah, I did love that matchup.
Yeah, Tatum, he was cooking at the beginning of the game, hey?
And then cooled down massively.
Yeah, he's kind of on those guys' level offensively, but when you look at the box scores, like Durant played 39 minutes, huge. Joe Harris 37, Kyrie Irving 37, Harden 36. When those 4 guys are playing the whole game out there, you just don't really have a chance if you're Boston. Like, we're talking about 3 of the best, 10 to 15 players in the NBA on one team, and we're just talking about a Boston team that's lost their second best player for the rest of the season, Jaylen Brown, to a wrist injury. He's going to get surgery. So Boston really, they're going to try hard, but they don't actually have a chance in this series. There's just no way. There's no talent. There's not enough talent in their lineup. Kemba would have to start to play out of his skin and play the best basketball of his career. We've spoken multiple times about how inconsistent he's been. He had a great game against Washington in the first playing game, but he's gone 5 for 16 in this one. He did knock down 3 threes, which helped his scores, but threw the wall away 3 times as a minus 21. And you talked about how Durant was matching up against Tatum. Harden is going to have to do the same thing, and so will Kyrie. If those guys are playing the whole game, they're going to have to be matched up against these superstars on the other team. Like, you talked about how Kawhi was able to, throughout game 1, and Paul George not have to go and guard Luka. When these 3 Nets guys are playing the whole game, they're going to be the guys matching up against the superstars on other teams, and that's why these 3 guys got together, because in a playoff series, when they're together and they're taking their 3 best against the other team's 3 best, all of a sudden it becomes a ridiculously uphill battle for these other teams, even when the big 3 for Brooklyn aren't having their best night. As the game gets longer and longer, the tighter it is. How reliable and how dangerous this Brooklyn team's going to be.
They didn't shoot the ball Boston in game 1. Brooklyn as well. That's another thing. I think they missed their first 10 threes or something like that, 11 threes. They didn't shoot well at all. Yeah. 2
for 8 for Kyrie and Harden, 1 for 8 from Durant from deep, and 2 for 6 from Harris from deep. So, yeah, they didn't have one of their better games. They ended up winning by 11. They won in double digits. They were still able to hold.
That's the scary thing.
Yeah, they were holding Boston to 93 points. One thing that was quite interesting that I really enjoyed seeing was Time Lord Robert Williams. I thought his season was done with the injuries that he had. They started him for like a month, and he was putting up some good numbers, and then in that old story, the reason that he probably wasn't getting a lot of minutes in the first place because he's very injury prone. He missed a bunch of time. I thought, is he even going to show his face in this series? He's come out in 22 minutes, had 11 points and 9 boards, and then had a historical franchise record of 9 blocks. So think about this. Robert Williams has got more blocks in a playoff game than any of Bill Russell's playoff games. It's completely ridiculous. We're talking about like the best defender of all time who's won 11 championships, and Time Lord's got more blocks than him in a game. So, it's not going to help Boston win the series, but it's a very interesting thing, and I expect him, to play probably more minutes than Tristan Thompson, because even though Thompson did a little bit in the box score, you don't want him out on an island trying to guard these guys. You just don't want to, ever want to see that, because he's been able to do it at times in his career, but it's definitely, not something that Boston want to see. But I don't think we need to say too much about this series. Smart, he does what he always does when his back's against the wall. He actually played a really good game, tried really hard on defense, kept his team in it for a lot of time, hit some ambitious three-pointers. Whenever you think he can't shoot, he comes in and knocks in 3 threes. So, I really like Smart, but yeah, it's depressing if you're a Boston fan to watch this, because not only are they outmatched talent-wise, but they're missing Jaylen Brown, and you're already thinking about next season, because Brooklyn, it feels like it's going to fly right through.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd expect them to absolutely crush him in this second game. I think if we saw a slow start in that first game, I'd expect a 20-point win at least, and none of those big three to play more than, 25, 30 minutes in game 2. I think it could be a real blowout.
Morale's got to be low for Boston for sure.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so then it is the 3-6. So Milwaukee, Miami. So this is another one of those games Dust was mentioning before that they've already played 2 games, played their second one this morning. So what was your prediction for that?
I had Milwaukee winning in 6.
Yep,
winning
same.
on the road in game 6.
Yep.
Yeah. I think
you go.
No doubt that game 1, for anyone who checked into that, I think that was a really early one as well. So
that was an early tip as well.
The back end of that game, but that felt like a game 7. That felt like it had the whole series on the line in game 1, because you weren't sure what you're going to get from Miami. And it's almost like, how many more chances do Milwaukee need to knock off a team that they should beat? They should have beaten Miami last year. Whatever circumstances were causing them in the bubble to not play their best basketball, that's neither here nor there. They've got a full team. They've brought in Drew Holiday. They've got home court advantage, and it's time for Giannis and the Bucks to run over Milwaukee and start to make a legitimate run to the championship. And then Miami in game 1 gave them absolutely everything that they could handle. Miami really showed some ticker in this one. Dragic was huge. He was channeling Dragic from the bubble. 25 points, 10 of 17 from the field, 5 of 10 from 3. That's probably his best game of the season, I reckon. Dragic, he's just been waiting on that till playoff comes. They got 10 from Hero off the bench. Duncan Robinson was outstanding. He had 7 triples. There's just a Duncan Robinson game that can basically happen at any time. Ariza gave him 12 boards. He was really solid. He did a lot for them defensively. They were, even though Giannis had a big game, 26 and 18, he was not efficient from the field in game 1.
Took 27 shots, yeah.
27 shots, put up 3
Wow.
threes, didn't make any. Only shot 37%, and he missed 7 free throws. So through 5 turnovers. So Miami did a great job on him. So when you think about all those elements for Miami in game 1, they did what had to be done. I suppose it came down to what kind of closing effort could they get from Jimmy, and what kind of game could they get from Adebayo. You saw a lot of game 1. What did you think about particularly Adebayo and Jimmy Butler in game 1?
I don't know what's up with Adebayo. He had another slow start again today. Something's off. I don't know if it's the size or the length of Lopez. It's really putting him off, but he just seems to. I really remember him being more offensively dynamic. Like, it feels like he gets the ball, and a lot of times he needs it in that mid range or needs it in the pick and roll to be able to operate. But I remember him being a guy that could sort of not create something out of nothing, but just had a variety of moves. He could face up and take a 16, 15 footer, or he could attack the rim and use his speed and athleticism to get around opposition bigs and then finish at the rim. And it feels like he can have a little bit of a floater to his game. But at the moment, it seems to be always sort of pass first. If he gets the ball, can he dribble handoff for a Duncan Robinson 3? Can he find Dragic to operate in a pick and roll with him, rather than just getting the ball and just being like head down, attack. It feels like he can be a lot more aggressive in that sense. So that's been disappointing the first 2 games. The Jimmy side of things it's tough. Giannis is defending him, and this is similar to what I was telling you with wanting to see the best defensive players on the best offensive players with Kawhi on Luka tomorrow, which should be absolutely unbelievable to watch from just those 2 going at each other. But Giannis, I've loved it. I've criticized him in the past for, especially during the regular season, to, supposedly being the defensive player of the year and such a dominant force on that side of the ball. But I never see him taking the best offensive player on the other team. Well, these first 2 games, he's taken Jimmy and he's really affected him. I think game 1, Jimmy was 4 of 22 or something really bad.
Exactly.
And
4
today,
of 22.
4 of 22.
6
okay.
turnovers.
6 turnovers. And today, I think he shot the ball a little bit better, Jimmy, but he wasn't that good. So I think the Giannis impact is, I know he's been really dominant offensively, Giannis, and crushing the boards very hard, but the defense is what I'm most impressed with, because it's really taken Jimmy out of the game. And if Miami didn't already have issues scoring the ball, if you take Jimmy out offensively, then it really puts a whole lot of pressure on, the other 4 guys on the court. So I love that. I think you go.
Miami did everything they needed to do in game 1 to steal it. It's just that Jimmy and or Bam weren't able to take over and hit that big shot to seal the game, and it's a lot easier said than done, but because we're talking about a great defensive team, and obviously Drew Holiday has made, Milwaukee such an even more difficult prospect when it's, the last few possessions of the game, and they've got him out there defensively to make it difficult. But, Butler really struggled, and you touched on Bam's inability, I suppose, to get it going offensively. He had 9 points. He's. I think we need to tame our expectations on how good Bam is offensively, because he does a lot of great things for your team, particularly defense, rebounding, and distributing the ball. But he's certainly not a go-to player where he can get his own shot at any time. That he's just not that guy right yet, and that means that Miami basically need that all-around game from the rest of their team to get over Milwaukee when they're playing their best basketball. And Milwaukee didn't play their best basketball in the first game, but Middleton was cooking. For anyone who didn't see, Middleton made the biggest shot of the game. Butler sent it to overtime with a clutch layup, but in overtime, Middleton hit a huge turnaround jump shot on Duncan Robinson, where he kind of got Duncan Robinson lost in a pick and roll, where Robinson turned his back and then came back to Middleton, and it was just too late. Middleton elevated from the right wing and hit nothing but net. So we know how clutch Middleton can be as a player, and he basically single-handedly won them that game in game 1. It's just a luxury to have a guy like him on your team who can just go get a bucket whenever he wants, and it really starts to make you think that Milwaukee are that much better. They were able to get a big game from Holiday, 20 points and 11 rebounds in his first playoff game with the Bucks. Without hitting a 3, he was still able to eclipse 20 points. Lopez gave him 18 in the first game as well. So Milwaukee played deep, pretty good basketball in that first game, and were able to come away with the win. Miami were just this close to dragging it out and really flipping potentially the pressure right onto Milwaukee, because if they were able to win that game 1, then Milwaukee would have been thinking, like you said to me, Chris, in message, you said they would have been thinking, oh shit, this is happening again. Like, all the pressure and everything's going to come on us. If they were down 1-0 going into game 2, it would have been nothing but pressure. But thanks to Chris Middleton hitting a big one and giving them that lift, they were able to basically come out and just smack them. They annihilated them in game 2. And I think this might be basically the series right now, because they had their shot in game 1, Miami, and then they basically got wiped off the floor in game 2. When you look at some of the stat lines for Milwaukee in game 2, 31 points for Giannis on 12 of 13 shooting. Holiday, 11 points, 15 assists.
Yeah,
for only two turnovers. So he was basically making the offense hum.
Say his name.
Gave him another 17.
I want you to say this
Bryn
guy's
Forbes.
name. Oh.
Bryn Forbes, 8 of 12, 6 of 9 from 3. That's why, I was unsure if he could get minutes on this team, but we know that Forbes can shoot. If he's able to get open looks, none of this happens without Giannis being dominant, getting to the basket, and drawing in the defense in general. But, you got to have a guy on the bench who can come in and win a game for you in the playoffs. And that's basically what Forbes has come in and done. Come off the bench, they're in the lead, but he cemented the game, winning it by knocking down 8 triples. That's absolutely huge. Big for him, more than they could ever probably have wished that they were going to get from Forbes when they picked him up in the offseason. Connaughton hit 4 threes. He was big. Bobby Portis gave him a little bit. He's probably been pretty solid all season, Portis. I think he's shown his worth overall. So it's basically in the first 2 games, they didn't play amazing in the first game, but overall they're humming Milwaukee, and I think it might be curtains. I think there's a chance that if they win game 3, this could even be a sweep.
Yeah, you said it best, right? So the first game was everything for the Bucks. They didn't shoot the ball well, 5 of 31 from deep, and yet they still found a way to win an OT. So, as I sort of said to you, after the game happened, it was like, man, if they lost that, deja vu, and here we go again, and all of that sort of stuff. So it's you want to often say don't overreact to game ones, but this is a different case given Milwaukee's situation and their failures the last few years in the postseason, whether it be not being able to get past Toronto in the conference finals or losing last year to Miami. So this was massive. And then obviously the game today, just the shooting, as you say, blew the doors off Miami. It was never close. I don't know how many they hit in the first quarter. 10 threes, something like that. They
46 to 20 at quarter time.
46. Okay, there you go. So I think they hit at least 8 or 9 threes. Just
a Miami defense that's elite as well.
Absolutely slaughtered them. But yeah, I think you've mentioned it. Eric Bledsoe last year, Drew Holiday this year, like that should tell you everything. That's such a difference. Not only offensively upgrade, but obviously being able to distribute, play make, his defense. And that's another thing with Butler as to why he's not playing great, because when Giannis isn't on the floor defending him, it's Drew who's on the floor defending him. So you don't get a break, right? And so that's another thing that Drew's been able to do, which sort of adds to why it's quite impressive with Dragic. I think Dragic still had 17 or 18 today, but Drew takes a lot of Dragic as well. When Jimmy and Dragic are both on the floor, Giannis goes to Jimmy and Drew takes Dragic. So it's tough to score against this Bucks team, I think, to finish out the regular season. You know how the Spurs put 140 on him, and a lot of these teams were able to do whatever they wanted. I think it was kind of Milwaukee looking ahead to the playoffs and being in cruise control, and now we're really starting to see them flex their muscles. So I do think there'll be a bit of fight left in Miami. They're obviously a very prideful team, and going back home to Florida, where it's basically been fair game to anyone with COVID over the past 12 months. They've basically been open for them in Texas. If you ask locals of those two states, they probably wouldn't know what COVID is because life's been normal for them. So expect a packed out arena there back in Miami to really will them to try and get a win or two and make a series out of it. But it does feel like it's already done. That's for sure.
It'll be a dogfight, no doubt. I expect it to be real tight. They'll do everything they can, Miami, to make it a slower game and to not let Milwaukee score, well over 100 points. But they're going to need something in the clutch from Jimmy, or some kind of offensive game from Bam for them to have any chance to win this series.
And they might need another hero 20, 25 plus. He's been pretty bad all year and hasn't done a terrible amount. So they really might need a big game from one of those guys.
They really, they started this season with the thinking and basically the necessity to start Hero and give him his due for what he was able to do in the playoffs last year. They wanted to start him. They wanted him to be a big playmaker, a big minutes guy, a guy who can really be in their lineup. But the first 2 games, they started Kendrick Nunn, and Nunn hasn't given them anything in either of those games. So I wouldn't even be surprised if they did a switch up and brought Hero into that starting lineup.
Yeah. Potentially. Oh, well, I know they need his scoring off the bench. I was going to say either Hero or Dragic. So key thing to look out for in these adjustments in these next couple of games when they head home. That's for sure. Okay. So the final series for the East, Knicks, Atlanta. So that's obviously the 4-5 battle. Who did you have for that?
I had Atlanta in 6. I thought they had too much talent to get it done.
Okay. Interesting. I had Knicks in 7.
That's what I did put originally, and then I changed it to Atlanta because this is probably the funnest series, I think.
Absolutely. So there was really nothing in that first game. I'd actually say if Randall wasn't shocking, probably one of his worst games of the season, I'd say the Knicks probably could have won that. I think he shot awful. Was it 4 of 18 or 4 of something really bad? So if he just made a couple more shots in a 1-possession game, the Knicks are probably able to steal that, given the production they got out of Burks and Rose and a few of these other guys when Randall wasn't able to do much. So I don't expect Burks to be able to drop 25 plus in all the games. But if he can contribute 15, along with Rose contributing his 15 and 20, and Bullock can make a few more shots. Bullock had a quiet game. Thought RJ Barrett was actually excellent. If Randall can get back to his normal self where he's dropping 30 plus, then obviously you'd have a lot more confidence in the Knicks. But as we know with Randall, his game is primarily perimeter based this year. Anyone who's watched him, he takes a lot of jump shots. So unfortunately, you get sometimes the good with the bad, and this was one of those because he couldn't throw a rock in the ocean. It was pretty ugly. I don't know if he was overwhelmed by the moment, being the main guy in the Knicks, packed arena, 15,000 there at the Garden, which would have been pretty crazy to see, pretty crazy to be in the stands. But yeah, I'd expect similar to a few of these other teams that you think will bounce back in game 2. I think that Randall himself, just as an individual, he'll bounce back and have a big game too. I can't see how he doesn't have, 25, 30 and has his imprint on a lot of different things, because he's everything for their offense. If you look at, their other options, it's really not that good outside of a Derrick Rose and a Burks, and RJ Barrett has been good, but he's more inconsistent. So need Randall to bounce back in this game too. But quickly from the Atlanta side of things, given all the slander he gets, it's right to give him credit, and that's Trae Young, who was unbelievable. He's obviously his name is forever associated with Luka after the draft night trade. But Trae delivered that type of performance in front of a packed out MSG that was in the first quarter chanting, fuck Trae Young, fuck Trae Young. So it's like, it's a lot to deal with. And credit to Trae, because he seems to have one thing, and that's an elite floater. Anytime you can sort of get to that, you're always so confident that he can sort of finish. And I think when he had the ball in his hands in that last possession there to end that first game, Das, it was like, it didn't feel like he was missing when he was able to sort of beat that initial defender, and you realize he wasn't going to take a step back or a jump shot like a lot of these guys do to end out games, and he was able to get to the rim. You're like, oh, he's finishing this floater. Like there's sort of no way, given it was a lot of Taj Gibson at center for the Knicks in that first game. So given the rim protection, because I think it was either Noel got injured or got fouled out. It was one of the two. I can't think of exactly injured. So the fact that it was Gibson there, just a really high IQ, smart play from Trae Young there at the end to drive and cap off what was such a good game. Not that it's related to performance, but what did you think of Gallinari's haircut?
Oh, mate, it stood out so much straight away.
Didn't it?
I thought he looked like an idiot. I thought it was.
Hey, it looked so bad. Gosh.
It looked awful, but he's a fiery European player, and obviously he has a bit of history and of bad blood with the Knicks. So I think it was a little bit of a FU to the Knicks. He can do whatever. I can do whatever I want, and he actually had a lot of looks at three. Gallinari, he had about 7 looks at three, and I think he missed all of them. But they would have been potential daggers that would have gone to Atlanta. Potentially put him in an even better position to win. But yeah, Gallo might actually play a little bit of a big part in this series, especially the games in New York. But just that his haircut, the performance from Trae, the crowd noise that was digging into everything that Atlanta were doing, and it probably also led into the pressure that Randall felt on himself to have to go out there and have a big game, because it was rocking. There's lots of commentary in the media about it, and anyone who was watching it on the broadcast could see just what it meant to Knicks fans, and to have a game of this magnitude at the Garden for what feels like has been a decade since they've had a proper playoff game. But they're a winning team when they've got a home court in the playoffs. It was completely unfathomable at the beginning of the season, but yeah, that was definitely the most entertaining and the best TV value to watch game I found, and out of all the series so far. The reason I picked Atlanta at the beginning is because I think they just have more talent and more scoring. I think overall, one thing that stood out after the first game was I thought Nate McMillan did a really good job of really organising the team and tempering, I suppose, their expectations through highs and lows throughout the game. Obviously, it helped that New York started off slow and weren't able to shoot the ball well, but they did get John Collins involved early. He hit a couple of early threes, made a couple of big defensive plays. I think they can definitely get more out of him. Only 5 of 9. That's not a lot of shots for John Collins, where I think he's a guy who can particularly be big for them. Obviously, Trey, when you look at his lineup, I might not get into Trey just yet because I want to talk about how good he was in the clutch. Yep. Capella did his job.
Capella was good.
He was probably supreme to what Noel was offering up the other end. Always been a bit of an issue with Noel that he's not able to stay on the court for a long time. It's been pretty remarkable the way he's got through this whole season, doing so well at the center position. But it looks like it's going to be a crap load of Taj Gibson in this series.
It does.
You would only expect that when you've got Thibodeau coaching at the helm. He was quite nice for them. He's a big body in there. He does his work on the offensive glass, and he does the pick and roll really well with D Rose. I thought Bogdanovic, he started slow, but he was able to put together a nice overall game, 7 of 15. He hit 2 or 3 of the biggest threes in the game, huge corner threes under some pressure, nothing but net. It seems like every game in the last 2 months, Bogdanovic has hit 4 threes.
I love him. He is
so
good.
They mentioned in the broadcast, second most threes in the last 2 months besides Curry. He's actually been the best 3-point shooter in the league. So what an acquisition for Atlanta. And could you imagine if Milwaukee had pulled that off and got him as well to go along with Drew Holiday? That would have been something. But Bogdanovic has been huge for them. And I tell you, it's good to see DeAndre Hunter back into the lineup because he can really help them. It was unsure whether he was going to be able to give them anything, but he hit a massive 3 out of nowhere.
Talk about big threes. Yeah,
it's good for his confidence. Huerter was solid for them as well.
Yep.
Gallinari, I spoke about how he potentially could have had a big game and maybe got them the win a bit earlier. But I think probably the most important guy besides Trey for them was actually a brief few minutes from Lou Williams. In 12 minutes, he gave them 13 points. There was a run there in the third quarter where the Knicks looked like they'd taken control of the game. They got on top on the boards. They were locking up defensively and forcing Atlanta to shoot a lot of jump shots. And then Nate McMillan made an adjustment to bring in Lou Williams to close out that third, and they cut into a 10-point lead. And I think they cut it to as little as 2 at 3-quarter time. And Lou Will was just cooking in the mid-range. He hit a big 3 as well. He just came out, got away from his defender in the pick and roll, was able to get his leaner left jump shot. So, that is what you can get from Lou Will. And obviously he's not scared at the moment, and he feels like he's really getting his role a bit sorted with Atlanta. And I thought he was absolutely massive to the momentum of the game. I thought the Knicks looked like they were going to potentially have an insurmountable lead going through the fourth, but he was able to get them to hang around until Trae Young came back into the game. Trae Young, he showed his maturity in this game, and I think I've spoken about it. We've spoken about it throughout the season. What's changed in his game is he's stopped jacking up threes. He stopped jacking up so many. He only took 2 threes in this game.
It's good.
You think it's very surprising. He didn't let the defense off the hook the whole game. He kept attacking to the basket, kept kicking out guys for threes, ended up with 10 assists. Probably could have had a few more if Gallinari had knocked down a few. But you just touched then on how good his floater game is. He also went to the free throw line 8 times and made all 8. There was about 3 possessions in a row in the fourth quarter where he came off the on ball, hesitated, drew that contact, and was able to get to the free throw line for a couple of easy ones. So that's maturity in his game, and being able to know that he can score and find different ways to put the Knicks defense at a disadvantage. So I thought that was really impressive from Trae Young, and they have swung the series. They've won the first game. I expect the Knicks to come back, but this was big for their confidence, Atlanta. They think they can do it, and having such a big performance like that and such a clutch win, I think probably when you can break the whole game down to that last possession where Thibodeau decided to bench Derrick Rose, bring in Ntilikina, who hadn't played a minute the whole game, and then Ntilikina just got cooked by Trae Young, and then he got basically a layup to win the game. What did you think about that?
Yeah, well, who was the other option? Probably Alfred Payton, right? If you weren't going to put Ntilikina out there. And Payton didn't play many minutes this game either. He might have played 15, 20, had no impact on the scoreboard as well. I think he might have if he scored one basket. He really did nothing for me. The guy who was probably really good outside of Rose and Burks was Quickly. He gave him a nice spark in that, was it second quarter? He sort of came on and hit a couple of threes in a row, and God, the Knicks faithful absolutely love Quickly. So seeing him knock down some shots just absolutely gave him so much energy and juice, that crowd. And that's something that needs to be addressed moving forward. I think you probably still do start Peyton just for the defensive side of things. But yeah, you do expect Thibodeau, obviously, so much experience in the playoffs. Obviously, McMillan does have experience as well, but you expect Thibodeau to make adjustments in this second game, whether it's maybe you put a bigger body on Trey. Maybe you try and throw a bit of Reggie Bullock on him to try and just see how he deals with that. You got to change something up, because if you let that happen again, it's probably going to lead to an Atlanta win, because they just have too many guys that can play off it. And we've shown that Trey isn't now a step back three or bust type player. He's got the maturity in his game to score from all three levels, and he's now developing that awareness and IQ that, this is my bread and butter. They're giving it to me. I don't need to force it and have a flashy, step back behind the back, three in front of, whatever, 15,000 at Madison Square. Just keep going with what's working. They're giving me this. If they're going to go over screens and force under, easy floater. If they want to, send a big man up to meet me for that floater or mid range, just throw a lob to Capella. So he feels probably like he's in a lot of control. He said he didn't really care about the crowd noise or anything, because you go back to his college days where he playing for Oklahoma, and he was one of the most hated players in college basketball there, if you weren't an Oklahoma Sooner fan. So he said that stuff didn't worry him at all. So it's really impressive. I think, it was the first player to score more than 25 points and 10 assists since Derrick Rose in a playoff debut. It was some stat like that himself. So we obviously remember D Rose's debut there in against the Celtics in the Boston Garden series. So it's great to see that the Trey's really taken off, and this series now suddenly becomes really interesting. You assume, similar to all these other teams, that you'd expect them to win game one, or at least keep it competitive, that they'll make the necessary adjustments and be ready to go. I think the key there is Randall, I don't think is going to shoot that badly again. Surely you've got to learn from that and come out a bit better in this second game.
I think you're right. I think the front court is where New York has that potential advantage, at least scoring the ball. Randall, he's cooked Atlanta the 3 times they played them this season. He's really cooked them. So I expect a big game from him. The guard rotation is interesting for the Knicks. Where do they go from here? Because Thibodeau really, he leaned on D Rose a lot. Like, this game didn't go overtime, and he clocked almost 38 minutes.
Wow.
So maybe they should just be starting D Rose, because he's obviously a guy that they're going to play the whole time through. He got 17 and 5 assists on 50% shooting. So he was able to score on Trae Young. But obviously he, he's not the defensive kind of lockdown guy that you may need on Trae Young. So be interesting to see what they do with that, and whether they give Elfrid Payton another go in game 2. Quickly, you said we saw that he played well. I think maybe Knicks fans have been asking for him to start over Payton basically the whole season. So there's a chance that maybe that could happen. But yeah, I thought Alex Burks was great. Like, we expect Bullock to be able to knock down more wide open shots. He only played 18 minutes, got 6, and Burks, was awesome. 27 points in 26 minutes, 9 of 13. It was crazy, getting wide open looks. So Knicks still got some good stuff out of their bench and their overall team. So I don't think they'd be too disappointed in the loss. There's probably not too much that they can point out, with Barrett having a nice game, going 14 and 11 on 40% shooting. Randall's probably the key, to what happens in game 2, whether he's able to have a big game. And I think, once the series shifts back to Atlanta, anything could happen. You expect probably Atlanta might have more talent, but there's no reason why the Knicks can't go in there and make the game their style and make it a real grind out and potentially overpower Atlanta as well. So I still think this is very, very even, and definitely interested to see what happens in game 2, because game 1 was a ripper. You know, when I'm looking at the summary here, there was only one team got over 30 points in either of the first 3 quarters, and then it was 36-32 in the fourth. So they really came to play in the fourth, and it was a well played fourth, a big spectacle, and went right down to the wire. So yeah, this is definitely a series to keep watch on. But yeah, hopefully our predictions are right. But you know, the Knicks are making it difficult no matter what.
Yeah, 100%. I think that the last thing I'd finish on is, if Trae Young's going to cook you on offense, then if you're the Knicks, you got to find out Trae Young on defense. You got to make sure whoever's guarding him, you give him, whoever he is guarding, you give them the ball and let him, go to work. Really punish Atlanta for having Trae Young out there to defend. It's probably one of the few baskets or good shots they got in crunch time yesterday. Where I think it was RJ Barrett got matched up against Trae and just took him down to the low post and Niddle hook there. And it was like, man,
impressive.
Why don't they do that again?
It seems like Barrett's developing. You know, you can tell that he's starting to understand the game more. And, if he can break out in one of these games, that'd be huge for the Knicks.
There was one thing that someone was saying, and it was potentially Bill Simmons, maybe another media person in America, how RJ Barrett, when he misses a shot, he seems to have a very quick jump to get back up and put back the miss, very active. And someone was then saying, well, he did play with Zion in college in Duke. So if there's one thing you can learn from Zion, it's, how quick is Zion's putbacks. If he knows he's got to lay up short or he's pushed it too hard, his second bounce to get his own putback. Like, how many rebounds do you reckon Zion gets just off his own missed shots, like, let alone defense? Like, it happens all the time. So there's a little bit of RJ Barrett. There's a little bit, of Zion in what RJ Barrett does with those particular putbacks. And it seems like he cares. He's just a competitive guy. And it was very surprising that, if I could almost swear, Dust, that if there was one guy you thought would show up in game 1, it would have been Randall, not Barrett. I didn't think Burks would drop what he did. So I think that was just the only slight disappointing fact about the whole night, was that everything was amazing. It was so good to see Madison Square Garden rocking and how loud it was. And the only thing missing from it was a big night from Randall, which is what we've come to expect a lot this season.
I think defensively they did a good job. Like Collins was into him a lot. Gallinari really worked hard trying to deny him the ball when he was posting Gallo up, because, if he gets spaced one-on-one with Gallo, it should be over. But Gallo was working really hard to try to be physical with him and push him off the block and get him outside that 3-point line, because they also did a pretty good job of, when he did put the ball on the floor, they were really collapsing. And, as a team, the Knicks, besides Burks, who, when they did double team and they kicked out to Burks, he was not only knocking down threes, but shot fake, one dribble pull up. The rest of them, Barrett only hit 1 3, quickly hit a couple, but they weren't off double teams of Randall. Bullock's their guy for this, and he didn't hit any threes in the game. So, they might have to think about, how can we get some more shooting out there? Because if they're going to double Randall every time he puts down the ball, they're going to have to make the defense pay some other way, And that is the Achilles heel of the Knicks when you look at it. They don't have the shooting. So Atlanta, if they're smart, and Nate McMillan, if he's smart, they're going to continue to do whatever they can to stop giving Randall easy shots and make him throw it to guys who you play the percentages on whether they hit them or not.
Yeah, well, that's a good point about Bullock being, the main primary shooter for them. So you'd expect him to get more minutes in game 2. I mean, if you're looking at it from Tibbs' perspective, in game 1 with Rose and Burks cooking, it was pretty hard to look to move any one of those guys to the bench to bring back Bullock. So you were probably going to finish with, those two guys and Barrett Randall and Taj Gibson. So just unfortunate timing for Bullock, because he never really got going that game. And then, as you say, not even clocking 20 minutes. Yeah, it's probably obviously not what he would have liked. So you'd expect a bounce back from him as well in game 2.
I'm not sure if they probably should have kept Austin Rivers as well, because he had a few big shooting games for them. And, guys playing proper minutes for Denver, he can still put the ball in the basket. He might not be the perfect player. He's definitely got his flaws, but guy can shoot, guy can score. And I think he could have helped them in this scenario. They definitely got to find a way to lock down Lou Will. They can't afford to get nothing out of Elfrid Payton and then Lou Will come and cook them for 15 and 14 minutes. They can't afford that again for sure. The Knicks, because I felt that was one of the most important parts of the game.
Yeah, and look, my counter to that would be there's another player that comes on that if he's going to cook you offensively, you've got to make him work defensively because him and Trae Young aren't the most, they're obviously not known for their defense at all. So you've got to punish him if McMillan's going to do that for offense. You've got to make sure that they really suffer defensively because of that. So there's a few things to look out for these next couple of games to see how sort of both teams adjust, but more the New York side.
It'll be close.
I just think overall it's just going to come down to single possessions throughout every game. We just spoke about Denver and Portland, how it was Portland winning by double digits and then Denver winning by double digits. Every Knicks Atlanta game this series is going to come down to the last 2 or 3 minutes. It just feels like that. It doesn't feel like either team will be able to have a comfortable victory and be able to rest their starters. It feels like every guy is going to play big minutes, and it's every possession is going to be an important one, but especially down the stretch.
We don't want to let Tibbs off too much as well. Like I mentioned how he brought Ntilikina on and that backfired big time because Trae Young probably got a really nice, easy look at the basket to win the game. But after the timeout, I'm not sure what inbound play they were running. They obviously wanted to get the ball to Randall, but there was zero space. There was about 3 Knicks players around him, and it was going to be impossible. He was also not facing the basket when he caught the ball. He was running away from the hoop. So with only 2 and a bit seconds to go, there was no realistic chance for him to get a good shot off. So I think Tibbs would want his time back again and would want to be running a different play if they get in that scenario again, because, it's never easy to hit that shot. But when it comes down to a 1 possession game and we're talking about a 7-game series, that could be a really defining moment, and they got to make sure they take those opportunities, and you expect a little bit better from Tibbs in that situation.
Yeah, definitely. 0.9 on the clock as well. It was like, what are you sort of expecting with a guy to, have his back to the basket, poor pass. And as you say, there was really bad spacing in that particular. He caught it on the elbow or just, a bit further back from the elbow, that it was just, what do you expect a guy to do? You almost want to get some sort of screen and a shooter moving off the ball and catch. And Daryl Morey sent a funny tweet. Daryl Morey said something like, what was it exactly? I got to find it because it was something like I can't remember what happened the last time there was 0.9 on the clock and a team was up 2.
Hit a fadeaway.
Yeah, because he was the GM of the Rockets when it was 0.9 on the clock and Dame hit the series ender, at home. And there was 0.9 on the clock and Houston were up by 2. So it was very similar. So it was funny. Daryl's good for that. He is a bit of a humorous guy, but yeah, I just thought, just to reiterate your point, that's a confusing final play to sort of have there. And especially to give it to, I know he's your star player, but to give it to a guy like Randall.
He didn't have it going.
He's had a bad game. Why wouldn't you get some sort of screen off ball action for either Rose or Burks? I would have thought that's the move.
I agree. I think, Rose can definitely get it off quicker. He's a guy has been hitting easy clutch shots before, especially on the move. He can definitely get a shot off quicker than Randall can, and he can get separation from his player quicker. And Burks was a flamethrower. What was he, 9 of 12 for the game? So he was making a great case to get a look at the very end as well. But bad execution from them on that play. That'll they need to make sure that they rectify that if they get in that situation again.
Yeah. 100%. So that's where we'll probably leave things there, Dice, unless you want to speak about anything. So we basically went over every series. There's 3 important games, obviously tomorrow that we mentioned. 2 important games. Obviously game 2 for Brooklyn, Boston. Dice and I expect that to be a bit of a one-sided match, but then you have the 2 LAs. So the Lakers playing game 2 in Phoenix, and then your Mavs playing game 2 in LA there in the Staples Center. And it's a little bit annoying just from the timing point of view, because Lakers Phoenix tips off at 12 and Mavs Clippers tips off at 12:30. So a little bit annoying they didn't stagger that, so you could watch one game full start to finish and then go into the next game and watch that full. I do find that stuff a bit annoying when they don't do it.
I've only got 3 games on one day.
Yeah, so I do find that stuff confusing, just a scheduling perspective, because both of those LA games will be unbelievable to watch, just so important in terms of for the outcome of both sides, that whatever the thinking is to put both games, only with a half an hour gap, that's beyond me. But Yeah, we'll probably be back. I'd say sooner rather than later. To I wouldn't say at the end of the first round. We might be back even, when most
By the
teams
end
are
of the
either at
week,
game
I'd say.
4 or game 5, and sort of do an update and how we feel and things that have been happening. And then we'll obviously preview the second round and give out our predictions for that as well. So
There's no doubt there'll be a big storyline before probably the end of this week, before we get through the end of this series. So
Yep.
we'll almost definitely be back before the end of the week, and we will also be posting our playoff brackets. So make sure to keep an eye out for them, and hopefully they hold true for our sake. But yeah, and feel free to drop us some comments. We want to hear from you guys. We want to see who you guys think will win, and whether you agree with anything that we're saying or want to debate anything. We're always up for it. So get involved with the content, and yeah, more to come very soon.
Yep, well said. Okay, well, thanks very much for tuning in, guys. This has been a fairly long episode. I think it's going to probably be well over 90 minutes. So we hope you have enjoyed that bit of a wrap up from the first round, and I guess a bit of a look ahead to the rest of the series and how they'll go. Darcy summed it up perfectly. Reach out to us. We're always down to have a chat about basketball if you haven't figured out by now. Darcy and I will never shy away from a conversation around anything basketball related, not just NBA. Obviously, with the Olympics coming up, even WNBA, you obviously know about Shyla Heal. I don't think she did too much in her debut. I know she played the other day, might have played 10 or so minutes off the bench. I'm not even sure she scored. I think she might have been on the wrong end of a crossover. She might have got her ankles broken. I'll see if I can find you that link and send it to you, but I think I saw it. Yeah. So
she's playing behind one of the best assist girls in the league. So
okay.
It'll be tough for her to crack it as a rookie,
Nice.
But looking forward to see her progress, and also keep an eye out for what Liz Camboge is saying, because everywhere she goes, there seems to be some kind of drama. Today, she got called out yesterday for being one of the coaches, got fined 10 grand and suspended for a game for calling her out for being 300 pounds. But yeah, so
wow.
Keep an eye out for Liz Camboge content as well if you're following the WNBA.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, 100%. Anytime she's, around, it seems like drama can't escape her. It seems like she's always caught up in something. And there does seem to be a little bit of beef between not only her, but her and Bogut. So always seems to be some back and forth between those two. But I mean, now that Bogut's retired, he just has too much time on his hands, and he seems to be just tweeting like crazy. He's got a podcast of his own. I think it's called Rogues Bogues. And, he's able to just obviously swing, say whatever he feels, have no real repercussions now that he's not a professional player and all that sort of stuff. So that's certainly interesting, but it's weird, the dynamic between those two in particular. Arguably, she probably is the best Australian basketball player we have at the moment, right? Female. And then Bogut's probably one of the best Australians we've ever had. So interesting that those two have some sort of hatred for each other for whatever reason.
Bit of a shout out to the best female player of all time for Australian basketball, Lauren Jackson, as well. She just got announced that she's going to be inducted into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame.
Oh, huge.
So, amazing achievement for an Australian basketballer, and one of the best women to ever do it. She's an Olympic, an Olympic player, medalist, and then World Championship gold, WNBA MVP, Finals MVP, multiple championships. Yeah, she's the GOAT, basically. So shout out to Lauren Jackson, and hopefully more great Australians to come through the pipeline soon.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, we will speak to you guys very shortly. Enjoy this NBA ball, and we'll be back, no doubt, to yarn some more. Thanks again, guys.
All right. Go Mavs. See you guys.